Hello everyone. Let's start with a new topic, approaches to comparative politics. And these terms, institutional political culture, political economy, new institutionalism, and comparative methods form part of Unit 4, Paper 2nd, UGC Net Political Science. So, proceeding to the introduction. So, comparative political analysis means a systematic study and comparison of political system, institutions, processes, cultures, and behavior across different countries and society. In other words, it means किस country में किस तरह की government है. If institutions such as judiciary, legislature, executive, bureaucracy, if they are working properly, what kind of political processes are there? Multi-party democracy है, या फिर dictatorship है, या फिर semi-dictatorship है, semi-democracy है. What kind of political culture is there? Whether people are actively participating in the political process, and what are various social and political behavior of general populace. So in सबको study करके we arrive at comparative political analysis. Then this approach, it understand how political structure and practices vary across different countries. So उस basis पे एक pattern or consequence kind of relationship can be found कि particular कौन से factors काम करते हैं और कौन से नहीं करते. Then, the core aim of comparative analysis is to explore how and why different political systems function differently. Means they may be similar countries situated in a proximity, they may be neighbors, but sometimes same political process leads to different outcomes. So it is very necessary to identify those patterns, those similarities, and those differences in power structure. And finally, comparative political analysis addresses key questions such as why some democracies succeed while others fail, how different types of government like presidential, parliamentary government, or authoritarian government impact political outcomes. And it also addressed a different question whether having such kind of government, whether having a presidential form of government or a parliament or any authoritarian dictatorship can impact policy outcome or can yield different outcomes in a better way. Then the third question addressed by comparative political analysis is why certain societies have strong welfare states while others prioritize free market. So in short, it studies those behavior, certain behavior that applies pan country level. Like America की बात करें USA, it mostly toe the line of free market. Whereas Scandinavian models की बात करें या other democracies की बात करें, European democracy की बात करें, South Asian democracies की बात करें, they go for strong welfare system. So the comparative political analysis, it also study why there is such a behavior. It is not just individual behavior, it is behavior of a whole society. Now let's have a look at the major approaches to comparative politics, and first one is the institutional approach. So the core idea of institutional approach is to study the role of formal institutions. That's why the name. Formal political institutions like constitutions, parliament, executive, various branches of government, judiciaries, bureaucracies, political parties. So all formal institutions are studied to arrive at the final political outcome. Or in other words, these formal political institutions are studied to analyze how they are shaping the ultimate political outcome in any countries. And it also studies how all these institutions are organized, how they function, and how they influence political behavior, decisions, and power distribution. So ultimately, the overall at broader level, the comparative approach, it is about finding those patterns, finding patterns about how some input was given and how that input led to the output. So if you want to look at comparative political analysis or the comparative approach, the broader level idea is this, that we look at certain inputs, and those input can be formal like political institutions, they can be informal like social factors, they can be economic inputs. So all such inputs are studied, and then a correlation, a pattern is identified where such input led to that particular outcome. So यहाँ भी the Input here is the formal institution, formal political institutions are studied, and then the output, how the countries are functioning, how those institutions are functioning, and how those institutions are shaping the political landscape at country level. Now, this approach is one of the oldest and most fundamental, and that's why it is known as the classical approach. Now, let's have a look at the key features of the institutional approach. First, it focuses on formal structure, such as legally established institutions, जैसे parliament हो गया, judiciary हो गया, bureaucracy हो गया, constitutions हो गया. Then, the second feature is the legal and normative orientation, which means this approach is deeply legalistic, deeply legal oriented, and in other words, it means that it studies the legal dimension only. It studies constitutional legal document and institutional framework only to arrive at the output, to arrive at the political outcome. Then this approach, it assumes a stability and order that is often seen as a hallmark of political institution, formal political institution. In other words, this approach, it assumes that जो भी political institutions हैं, formal political institutions, judiciary हो गया, constitution हो गया, parliament हो गया, president हो गया, all of them, they are stable, resilient, enduring, and capable of maintaining political order. Then the next feature is about the shaping of political behavior. So it assumes that the general political behavior of people. So here यहाँ पे मैंने ये कोट किया ताकि आप लोग भूले नहीं. So when we talk about political behavior, it is usually related to the political decisions or political activities like voting, decision making, policy formulation, holding a public office, taking part in any kind of political activity. वो सब मिलके political behavior होते हैं. Now this approach, it considers that the general political behavior of people, it is influenced or limited by such political institutions. So for example, it believes that a presidential system, it encourages separation of power, where parliament, it emphasizes fusion of power. And both of these changes, they are acceptable to people, and people, they have arrived at such changes, the acceptance of such changes, because their political behavior was influenced or limited by formal political institutions. The next feature is about the historical roots. So this approach, it is rooted in the works of early political thinkers like Montesquieu, who analyzed separation of power, and that's how the three key pillars of government, judiciary, executive, and legislature, are separated. Then the second such political thinker, James Bryce, who compared constitutions and parliamentary system and also influenced this approach. And then Woodrow Wilson, who advocated for the study of public administration through institution. So all such the traditional political giants shaped this approach. And now the criticisms. So first, it overemphasized on formality, which in other words means it pays too much attention on the formal institution, and it is not just the formal institution that shape the political outcome and the political behavior of people. There may be other factors like informal norms, the culture, the social practices. There may be other, miscellaneous many factors that need to be taken into account to arrive at such a conclusion. And such a broad study was not undertaken by this approach. Then this method, it is biased towards Western democracies. क्योंकि most of the early comparisons, they were based on European and American model. यानी जो European and American models हैं या उनके जो particular political outcomes in their respective countries, they form these standards against which other democracies, other countries were compared. So there was a subjective bias, and this particular approach, it failed to explain or failed to appreciate the working of non-Western, post-colonial, and authoritarian societies who might have yielded, you know, a significant leap. Like, make a simple example. If somebody who has gone from 10 to 25, now you can see the difference of 15. So somebody has made the leap of 15. Now there is somebody who went from 1 to 20. Now this institution or this nation, it has made a leap of 19, which is commendable. To go from 1 to 20 against somebody from 10 to 25, it is quite significantly, and such leaps were seen in many post-colonial countries. But this approach of formal institution, it often ignored all other standards which might have been included in it. Then the third criticism leveled on it is the neglect of social forces, neglect of not only the social but the various economic, cultural, various miscellaneous factors that might impact political behavior, political outcome, and political life. And finally, the ultimate criticism leveled on it is that this approach is too descriptive and it does not explain why things happen. It just studies how they are structured. So this particular approach, it is superficial in its study, whereas it does not lead to a causality kind of analysis, a cause and factor analysis कि particular चीज क्यों हुई, change क्यों हुए हैं. Now the illustrative example. So comparison between the powers of US President and Indian Prime Minister, it is a good example of the institutional analysis, the traditional institutional comparative approach. So यहाँ पे the president is US के अंदर president is the both head of state and government. और India में the prime minister is the head of government, whereas president is the head of state. So यहाँ पे दो different institutions हैं. फिर यहाँ पे बाकी सब चीजें जो हैं मोस्टली द फॉर्मल इंस्टीट्यूशन, वो भी स्टडी किए जाते हैं कि जैसे यूएस के अंदर कि how US president is elected independently of the legislature and he exercises a strong separation of power. फिर इंडिया के अंदर यही सेम प्राइम मिनिस्टर who is the head of government, यहाँ पे स्टडी होती है कि how prime minister can act as a head of government while working within a parliamentary framework. कि the prime minister है is selected from the legislature, but then still he forms the part of executive. Then at the same time, that executive is run by or headed by a president who is elected by an indirect manner. That's how the system works, the formal institution work in India. So यहाँ पे ये सिर्फ एग्जाम्पल के तौर पे है कि how two such institution, head of government, US and India के बीच में compare किए जा रहे हैं. Now let's proceed on to the second approach, critical culture approach. So this approach studies how people's values, beliefs, emotions and attitude towards politics shape their political behavior and ultimately the nature of political system. So again, we are in the arena, in the lands, the whole zone of the comparative politics. Comparative politics, it means we are studying the input to get the output. So we are studying the relationship, how certain inputs led to certain outputs or outcomes. So यहाँ पे same पे is जो political culture approach है, the input is people's behavior, people's personal behavior, personal beliefs, personal value system. कि कैसे उनकी जो personal, जो total whole of their value system, it shapes political outcome at national level. So this approach, it focuses on psychological and cultural dimension of political life rather than the formal institution. Then in simple terms, this approach asks, how do people feel about politics? That's what the value system is. Now I failed to explain this thing. So one thing, the value system that is studied here, it is mostly concerned about politics. It is not about any other area of life. it is mostly concentrated on the politics कि लोग का पॉलिटिक्स के प्रति उनका कैसा बिहेवियर है, क्या सोचते हैं, what values they hold, their value, their belief system, their emotions or their attitude. So यहाँ पे somebody may be totally cold towards politics, like मुझे फर्क नहीं पड़ता, I don't care. फिर somebody might be very active कि yes, I want to take part in this the nation building exercise because I am certainly a part of it. फिर there may be some people who are at the moderate level, like yes, I have certain other duties like familial duties, personal duties, but yet yeah, I want to take part in the nation building. Then maybe certain people who believe that they owe something to it, like many people who have been benefited from the the whole political system, like जो रिजर्वेशन की वजह से बहुत लोगों की जिंदगी बदली है, दे फील दैट दे ओ समथिंग. फिर यही है कि जितने भी लीगल चेंजेस होते हैं, जैसे कह सकते हैं विशाखा गाइडलाइंस की बात करते हैं, जो शी गाइडलाइंस है, सेक्सुअल हैरेसमेंट एट वर्क प्लेस, सो उनके हिसाब से भी बहुत लोगों की लाइफ चेंज हुई. सो यहाँ पे दीज पीपल दे वर्क टुवर्ड्स नेशन बिल्डिंग एक्सरसाइज बिकॉज दे फील दैट दे ओ समथिंग. तो यहाँ पे मैं आपको 4 different value systems के example दीजिए, the cold, the active, the moderate and somebody who owes, और इनके भी different shades हो सकते हैं. So usually to check the value system of people, these simple listing exercise, simple questions can make this activities meaningful. Say questions are, how do people feel about politics, whether they are cold, active, do they trust the government, yes, no. A simple yes no answer, a Boolean algebra, can provide a significant significant change at national level. Then do they want to participate? So such questions are quite straightforward, and asking such question and arriving the data, even if it is the anonymous survey based data, we can arrive at national level value system, national level political value system of people. Now the key thinkers. So Gabriel Almond and Sidney Verba are the pioneers of this approach, and they have undertaken a classical study, the civic culture, in 1963, by which they explored how cultural value influence democracy. And they argue that it is the political culture that determine the success or failure of democratic system. So this political culture is how people feel about politics, whether they accept it, whether they are active towards it, whether they like it, do they want to participate, do they like the government, whether they like the working of government. ये सारे questions जो हैं personal level पे, all of these questions, they form part of political culture. Now the types of political culture given by Almond and Verba. So they identified 3 ideal types of political culture. The first is parochial political culture, in which people have little or no awareness of politics. People are mostly concerned about their personal life, and such examples are found in tribal, traditional or isolated society. Then the second type of political culture found by them was subject political culture, in which people are aware of the political system, but they play a passive role for some reasons. The political participation, it is little, and such examples are found in authoritarian or centralized regimes like communist country, like dictatorship. And finally, the participant political culture, in which people actively involved in politics, people vote, they join party, they protest, they engage with issues, they sit in, they demand their rights, they hold the government accountable. So यहाँ पे ये examples हैं are found in democracies. So इन सब के balance mix से Almond and Verba, they arrive at they study the civic culture, which is ideal for democratic stability. Now the strength of this approach, that this approach, it explains differences in political behavior कि different countries के अंदर, सेंट्रल एशियन कंट्री में, मिडिल एशियन कंट्री में, नॉर्थ कोरिया वर्सेस नाइजीरिया, या फिर साउथ कोरिया वर्सेस या दूसरी कोई स्कैंडिनेवियन कंट्री, उनके बीच में किसी डिफरेंट कंट्रीज में political outcomes जो हैं वो क्यों अलग अलग हैं and certainly they have this key thing in mind that the outcomes may be because of the political culture, maybe people are not inclined towards the political participation. Then the second strength, it bridges society and politics. So it is not just about the formal institution, it is actively taking account of citizen psychology and aligning them with the political structure. And it also explains how trust, legitimacy, civic duty, and alienation, all of the individual traits, individual pedestal, individual tools of value system, they influence government and policy. Then finally, the ultimate marker, ultimate outcome that which they both of them arrive in their particular study was the democratic stability. So a strong civic culture that is believed by them is that a strong civic culture is certainly a prerequisite to support stable democracy where citizens are actively participant but also tolerant and law abiding. Now, the criticism of this approach, first, the political culture thing is subjective and hard to quantify. Then, some critics they may label entire society as passive or parochial, and such generalization is simplistic and ethnocentric. Such generalization, such labeling can further the cultural stereotyping. Then this particular approach it overlooks institutions and economy. Many formal institutions, government हो गया, democracy हो गई, parliament हो गया, such political institutions are ignored, and then the role of economic forces are also ignored. So ये इसका next criticism है. Now examples, first India. So India is a diverse mix of participant and subject culture. कि in larger cities, in megapolises, citizens active participate in election and elections are mostly free and fair without any coercion. लेकिन अभी भी रूरल कंट्री साइड है या फिर कुछ रीजन्स हैं जहाँ पे there are certain binding criteria such as caste, kinship or patronage that influence voting. Then USA के अंदर भी there is a high participant culture. People are quite educated and aware and they participate in large number. But recently there have been polarization and distrust. Fair third case studies from North Korea. So which is a classic example of subject culture. यहाँ पे people aware that a certain government is there, but they do not have any say in the political participation because of its dictatorial tendencies. फिर बढ़ते हैं the political economy approach. So this approach it studies two-way relationship between politics and economy. First, how politics influence economy and how economy influence politics. जैसे यहाँ पे दिया हुआ है, it examines how political decisions shape economic outcomes and how economic realities influence political behavior. In simple terms, this approach it explores who control economic resources, how wealth and power is distributed in society, and what role does the government play in managing the economy, and finally, how do economic interests influence public policy. Now, input versus output relationship. So again, we are into the zone of comparative politics. So we are ultimately studying some inputs and then drawing patterns to about the outcomes that were created out of those inputs. And now here there are two similar inputs and two similar outputs. First, when the input is politics, we are studying the economic outputs, and when the input is economic, we are studying the political output. फिर ultimately in simple word it means एक particular देश के अंदर, एक particular nation के अंदर, it is the economy that forms the heart of everything, all relationships, whether bilateral or multilateral relationship, whether the international affairs, whether the domestic issues, whether to go about a particular decision. ये जितने भी decisions हैं, जितने भी political decisions हैं, all of them they are centered around economy. Economy नहीं होगी तो politics, institutions, bureaucracy, whether formal institutions या informal institutions, social institutions, किसी के भी कोई मायने नहीं होंगे. So economy is the inseparable part of any political process. फिर यहाँ पे what we are studying, that economy thing, even if we consider it as heartless, we do not give the primacy to the economic affairs, to the economic matters as much as we do to the social and political factors, because we consider money or any such economic activity, it is a tool in the hands of human. Otherwise, it is heartless. It does not have any mind of its own. It does not have any feelings of its own. So that relationship is quite justified. That reasoning is quite justified. But यहाँ पे हम जो study कर रहे हैं, that even if these are not the emotional actors, but still economic decisions matter, क्योंकि economic के basis पे ही the nations they rise, they fall. So यहाँ पे हम study कर रहे हैं कि the political decisions, कि particular कौन से resources हैं, कौन सा कितना taxation है, whether कोई government है, it wants to spend money, invest money in a particular adventure, in particular endeavor, whether the government it wants to increase certain benefits for welfare programs, किस कंट्री के साथ कौन सा ट्रेड रिलेशंस हैं, कौन सा ट्रेड नेगोशिएशंस हैं, कौन से रूल्स, कौन से लॉज बन रहे हैं, ऑल ऑफ पॉलिटिकल डिसीजंस दे डिपेंड ऑन द इकोनॉमिक फैक्टर्स. क्योंकि पर्स है तो लाइफ है, एंड लाइफ है तो पर्स जरूरी है. सो that is the simple thing. Now the major themes of political economy approach. So first, this approach it seeks to know the role of state in regulating markets, in providing public goods, in controlling inflation, introducing poverty. So in short, this approach it looks at the role of state at both the fiscal and administrative level. Fiscal level means how government is regulating its treasury. Then how the money that the government has in its treasury by the way of taxation or borrowing, how the money is utilized properly. So both fiscally and administratively, the role of state is being judged into by this particular approach. Then this approach it looks at the dynamics between capitalism versus socialism. So the political economy approach it compares different economic systems such as capitalism, which emphasizes private ownership, free markets, and profit. So in short, capitalism it is about free market plus no state. Fair. The second such type of government is the socialist state, which is about public ownership, equality, and social welfare. So this socialist state it is in short regulated market plus heavy state. So broader level पे both these approaches, both these economic system, the capitalist and socialist, दोनों एक दूसरे से बहुत opposite नजर आते हैं, बहुत different नजर आते हैं. Then जो बाकी कंट्रीज हैं वर्ल्ड में, मॉडर्न स्टेट, मॉडर्न डेमोक्रेसी, दे फॉलो मिक्स इकोनॉमिक मॉडल. जैसे इंडिया में है, वी ऑल्सो फॉलो सच मिक्स मॉडल की कैपिटलिस्ट एंड सोशलिस्ट टेंडेंसीज. दोनों सिस्टम से वी बोरोड the best of the things and try to integrate them into a coherent whole. So और बाकी बहुत सारी कंट्रीज में भी होता है, स्कैंडिनेवियन कंट्रीज हैं, यूरोपियन डेमोक्रेसीज में है, जो डेवलप ईस्ट एशियन कंट्रीज हैं, उनमें भी मिक्स इकोनॉमिक मॉडल्स हैं. सो ये सारे मॉडल्स जो हैं ये दे आर स्टडीड बाय द पॉलिटिकल इकोनॉमी अप्रोच. Then this approach also explores how global economic forces like global trade, multinational corporations, financial market, international financial institution, all of them impact national policies, national political and economic policies. जैसे एग्जाम्पल दिया हुआ neoliberalism, which integrate the idea of liberalism with newer outcomes. So these newer features were integrated, such as deregulation, privatization, and free trades. So ये जितने भी ट्रेड्स हैं नियोलिबरलिज्म कहलाते हैं. So political economy approach, it studies how these new features they have reshaped the global economy since the 1980s. क्योंकि जो लेटेस्ट कह सकते हैं लेटेस्ट इकोनॉमिक सिस्टम है and the dominant one is shaping the global economy since the 1980s. So एक question आता है, why does political economy approach studies this particular economic system in detail? Neoliberalism के बारे में ही क्यों? So first, this one is the latest model क्योंकि जितने भी models हैं they have upgraded because of the failing of the previous model. So जो last update है, the latest, it is of neoliberalism. Then neoliberalism, it aligned closely with the process of globalization जो world में which is accepted and which is the need of the hour. Third thing, most of the countries they are trying to revive it. They revive this particular philosophy, this particular economic system. क्योंकि people and market forces desire this thing. ये neoliberalism और इसके जो features हैं, deregulation, privatization, and free trades. So most of the market forces they want these features to be integrated into the economy. So that's why this economy is the dominant one recently. And finally, the political economy approach, it studies the class relations and economic inequality. So the questions are asked like who benefit from economic growth and who bears the burden of economic crisis. ये दोनों questions हैं, they are answered by the political economy approach. In other words, this fourth feature, it studies the integrate web of relationship between the owner classes, the capitalist class, the working classes, and then the economic outcome that they usually see. The economic outcomes in terms of wealth, whether there is a poverty, whether the wealth is distributed properly, or whether the classes are enriching themselves. It also studies the wealth concentration, how the wealth concentration leads to poverty and then exploitation of resources. So ये जो total कह सकते हैं the whole intricate movie of the relationship between classes and the economic inequality, all of them they study by this approach. Now let's have a look at the subfields within political economy. The first one is comparative political economy. So as the name suggests, it compares different models of economic systems and the political outcomes they lead to in different countries. I say it again, comparative political economy, it compares different models of economic systems and the political outcomes they entail in different countries. So example, this is Scandinavian model hai, which is a model of strong welfare state, high taxes and social equality. ये एक different model है. यहाँ पे same capitalism जो है free market and less state. Those two key features of capitalism ये इन सब एग्जाम्पल्स के अंदर प्रेजेंट है. नाउ उसके भी जो वेरिएंस हैं कि ऐसा नहीं है कि सारी की सारी कंट्री जो है वो सिंगल एक ही मॉडल फॉलो करती है. जैसे स्कैंडिनेवियन की बात करें, स्कैंडिनेवियन कंट्री लाइक स्वीडन, नॉर्वे, डेनमार्क, ये सब जो कंट्रीज हैं ये दे हैव अ स्ट्रॉन्ग वेलफेयर स्टेट, मींस गवर्नमेंट इट इन्वेस्ट हेविली इन द वेलफेयर प्रोग्राम. फिर उस स्ट्रॉन्ग इन्वेस्टमेंट के लिए जो पैसा आता है इट कम्स फ्रॉम हाई टैक्सेस. सो उसकी वजह से देयर इज अ हाई डिग्री ऑफ सोशल इक्वालिटी. और इन अदर वर्ड्स social equality at not the upper level, but at the lower level. Means they social level playing field has been provided by the Scandinavian model by the provision of strong welfare services, and such strong welfare services are levied by the high taxes. Now, the second model of capitalism is the Anglo-American model, which, as the name suggests, is prevalent in Anglo, yani UK and American in the USA. So both these countries they follow market-driven economy, free market, and limited welfare. Both of these countries they have started with the experiment of neoliberalism. जब Thatcher, Margaret Thatcher, and Reagan, both of them they adopted the features of neoliberalism और उसके बाद से अभी तक this model is quite working, but limited welfare it is an issue. Then the East Asian developmental state like South Korea, Japan, Singapore. So यहाँ पे strong state role, but the strong state it guides industrial growth. So यहाँ पे state is strong, but it provides sufficient succor, sufficient help, sufficient assistance to the industry to grow itself. Where the second subfield is Marxist political economy, which is based on the ideas of Karl Marx, and this subfield it emphasizes class struggle, exploitation, the role of capitalism in perpetuating inequality, all such features which are hallmark of Marxist ideas. Where this subfield it views the state as serving the interest of capitalists, the bourgeois class, and it criticizes the global capitalism by seeing it as a system that deepens inequality both within and between nations. So यहाँ पे the class struggle जो अगर आप लोगों ने मार्क्सिस्ट आइडिया पढ़ा है, वैसे यूजीसी के स्टूडेंट्स हैं तो आप आइडिया तो हो गई. So Marxist idea it suggests it says that the world it is divided into two classes: the bourgeois class, which is the owner class, the capitalist class, and the proletariat, the working class, the socialist class. So Marxist believes that there is an inherent struggle, inherent friction between both the bourgeois and the proletariat, between the working and the owner classes, because both of them they have different interests, and it is the owner class that has exploited the working class because of the power it have, because of the narrative it holds, and because the the influence money can have in perpetuating inequality. Now the relevance and applications. So the political economy approach it explains why some countries develop faster than the others in economic terms. Then it looks at the economic outputs such as poverty, unemployment, inflation, and inequality via both economic and political angles. Yani, if there is a poverty in any country, so this political approach it tries to look at the political and economic angles. Ki poverty kyun hai? If there are no jobs are there, if raw material is not there, if industrialization is not there, if there are certain avenue to generate money, if they are not exporting well, if they are spending more than they have, if there is a fiscal mismanagement, then they also look at the political level कि किस तरह की polity है, if it is a war economy, if it is a dictatorship, क्या welfare programs हैं, if the taxation are higher, if corruptions is there. So ये दोनों angle देखे जाते हैं. Then this approach it clarifies why government approves certain policies, like why government gives subsidies to certain section of population, why government is deregulating and privatizing uh, important or unimportant industries, why government took steps in certain trade reforms, why government led to the austerity measures. Austerity means cut down on consumption reducing welfare program, reducing the salary. So ये सारे decisions जो हैं ये study किए जाते हैं. Then this approach, it is useful in studying budget decisions, tax reform, welfare programs, and international trade agreement. So in short, this approach, it looks at the fiscal parameter, the trade parameter, the economic policy parameter, and the administrative parameters. All four parameters are studied coherently or comprehensively. Now, the first example is from India's liberalization story, India's LPG story in 1991. So here, India decided to shift from state-led development to market reform, from license Raj to LPG under global pressure. क्योंकि उस टाइम पे इंडिया हैड टू फेस द बैलेंस ऑफ पेमेंट क्राइसिस. इंडिया के पास एक्सटर्नल पेमेंट्स के लिए फॉरेक्स रिजर्व नहीं थे. सो इसके लिए इंडियन गवर्नमेंट, इट टुक असिस्टेंस फ्रॉम इंटरनेशनल फाइनेंशियल इंस्टीट्यूशन सच एज IMF. और IMF ने वो असिस्टेंस दिया, बट साथ में कुछ कंडीशंस भी दी दैट इंडिया हैड टू ओपन अप इट्स मार्केट. और जो कंडीशंस हैं, they are known as LPG, liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Then the second, welfare state comparison. So it compares why Norway has universal health care while the USA does not. So Norway, which comes under the Scandinavian model में जितने भी जो नियर पोलर कंट्रीज हैं, लाइक नॉर्वे हो गया, स्वीडन हो गया, स्विट्जरलैंड हो गया, डेनमार्क हो गया, so ये सब कंट्रीज जो है, स्वीडन हो गया, so they are advanced advanced economies. And स्कैंडिनेवियन मॉडल में भी आपको बताया, दे हैव स्ट्रॉन्ग वेलफेयर स्टेट कि गवर्नमेंट इट इन्वेस्ट हेविली इन प्रोवाइडिंग द बेसिक सर्विसेज कि एक लेवल प्लेइंग फील्ड तो सबको मिल जाए, और उसके लिए दे लेवी हाई टैक्सेस. सो this model also look at why Scandinavian country are able to provide universal health care at their country, whereas the USA की इकोनॉमी नॉर्वे के कंपैरिजन में बहुत ज्यादा है, मल्टीपल टाइम. बट सो जो ये छोटी कंट्रीज हैं, दे आर एबल टू प्रोवाइड सच बेनिफिट while our economic hegemon is not capable of doing so. Where it also studied the COVID-19 pandemic, the political economy of health system, why some country they handle the crisis better. और यही चीज है जो है कि सेम स्कैंडिनेवियन मॉडल्स हो गया या जो जितने भी मिडिल डेमोक्रेसीज हैं, all of them they fared very well during the COVID-19 pandemic, whereas the large countries जैसे यूरोपियन यूनियन की बात करें, USA की बात करें, और बहुत सारी जो यूरोपियन एडवांस डेमोक्रेसीज हैं उनकी बात करें, तो दे फेयर पुअरली. USA के उन सब के केस में कि there was a high degree of mismatch between the countries of global north and that of global south, global north versus global south. तो ये भी जो आउटकम है, ये भी जो बिहेवियर, इट इज स्टडीड बाय दिस अप्रोच. नाउ लेट्स proceed on to the criticism of political economy approach. So the first criticism is that this political economy approach may overlook cultural and institutional factors. Then the second criticism leveled on it is that the Marxist or the neoliberalist interpretations, they may carry political biases, because the political economy approach, it is highly critical of the capitalist system. क्योंकि the political economy approach, it in short, it studies poverty at both economic and political level. So the ultimate factor here, the ultimate actor here, which is often blamed, is the capitalism. So it provides space for the Marxist or the neoliberal interpretations to have their say. So ऐसे में if the Marxists हैं, they clearly disfavor the capitalist ideas. So The second criticism is about the ideological and the political bias. And third one, the global economy today, it is interconnected and dynamic because of global supply chain. So a single model cannot explain all the variations, which is the third criticism. Now let's proceed on to the fourth approach, neo-institutionalism. So the neo-institutionalism is a modern approach that has updated, that has progressed over the traditional institutionalism by providing space for the informal norms, historical legacies, and social routines. So, in other words, new institutionalism, it also studies political institutions, the formal political institutions, but it also take into account, it also factors in the informal norms, social norms, the historical legacies, and the social routines that shape political behavior. Then, in simple terms, new institutionalism, it asks, how do rules, both written and unwritten, social and political, shape the political behavior? Then how institutions have evolved over time, and how culture, idea, and strategic choices interact with institutions. So this new institutionalism, in short, first, it studies formal institutions, but it has also brought in various informal factors, informal checklists to widen itself. And that's how it has revived itself into a new particular approach. Where why was the need for new institutionalism? Because the traditional institutionalism, it was rooted in classical political science. It was too descriptive. It focused on Western democracies. It studies only the formal institution, and it ignored the informal, social, and other such factors. Now, the key features of new institutionalism. First feature, new institutions consider that institutions are not fixed or mechanical. They evolve, they change and interact with other forces, other sides, other dimensions like history, culture, and ideas. And this second feature is new institutionalism focuses how institutions shape political behavior and how individuals shape institutions. So here, the informality, which was absent in the traditional institutionalism, was brought in via backdoor entry. It is studying how formal political institutions like constitution, legislature, parliament, executive, bureaucracy, judiciary, all these institutions are shaping individual behavior, individual political behavior. फिर the backdoor entry of informality वो यहाँ पे है. It also studies how individuals are shaping these institutions, how individuals are shaping parliaments, executive, judiciary, legislature. यानी यहाँ पे जो इंडिविजुअल इनफॉर्मेलिटी है, इंडिविजुअल बिहेवियर है, इंडिविजुअल सोशियोलॉजिकल, इंडिविजुअल साइकोलॉजिकल डायमेंशंस हैं, उनको यहाँ पे अंदर लाया गया. And third feature, it emphasizes contextual analysis, which include time, path dependence, and embedded norms. So these are nothing but to arrive at any decision, arrive at any analysis or outcome, we should understand the context कि particular decision जो है, क्योंकि again at broader level we are studying input to arrive at the output. So यहाँ पे input versus output analysis चल रहा है. तो जो भी input है यहाँ पे दो चीजें हैं. First, formal institutions हैं, and then the informality. ये दोनों. अब इन दोनों input से जो output है, that is political behavior, उसको उसके पैटर्न्स स्टडी किए जा रहे हैं. दैट्स द ब्रॉडर थिंग. अब उस स्टडी में पहले ट्रेडिशनल इंस्टीट्यूशनलिज्म में ओनली फॉर्मल इंस्टीट्यूशंस वर स्टडी कि कैसे लेजिस्लेचर, कैसे जुडिशरी इज इन्फ्लुएंसिंग पॉलिटिकल बिहेवियर ऑफ पीपल, हाउ एग्जीक्यूटिव, हाउ ब्यूरोक्रेसी, हाउ लेजिस्लेचर पार्लियामेंट के लॉ से या पार्लियामेंट्री एक्टिविटीज की वजह से या जुडिशियल एक्टिविज्म की वजह से पॉलिटिकल बिहेवियर वाज शेप. ये पहले की स्टोरी है, ट्रेडिशनल इंस्टीट्यूशनलिज्म। नाउ द न्यू इनफॉर्मेलिटी, सोशल नॉर्म्स, इंडिविजुअल सोशियोलॉजिकल एंड साइकोलॉजिकल डायमेंशंस, वो भी इंट्रोड्यूस किए। नाउ उसके साथ ही अब कंटेक्स्ट जरूरी हो गया कि जो पर्टिकुलर बिहेवियर है एट नेशनल लेवल, उसका कंटेक्स्ट क्या है, द टाइम, किस टाइम पे वो हुआ। जैसे मान लो जैसे 2024 इलेक्शंस की बात करते हैं, तो 2019 की बात करते हैं, तो 2019 के टाइम पे जो इलेक्शन के जस्ट पहले द गवर्नमेंट इट एक्टेड स्ट्रांगली अगेंस्ट पाकिस्तान। सो उसकी वजह से पीपल दे फेवर्ड इट। सो ये टाइम है। So that's the context that is being talked about here. फिर आगे बढ़ते हैं, the three main types of new institutionalism. So first type is rational choice institutionalism, which sees individual as rational actors who are pursuing their interest, and here the institutions, formal political institutions, they are like rules of game that structure the strategic decisions of politicians, voters, and bureaucrats. सो यहाँ पे जितने भी इंडिविजुअल्स हैं, क्योंकि अल्टीमेटली जो पोलिटिशियन, वोटर्स, ब्यूरोक्रेट्स हैं, ऑल दी कार्ड्स ऑफ दिस दिस गेम, द गेम ऑफ पॉलिटिक्स, जितने भी एक्टर्स हैं, सब के सब इंडिविजुअल्स हैं। सो दिस रैशनल चॉइस टाइप, इट अज्यूम्स दैट ऑल सच एक्टर्स दे आर रैशनल, वो अपना डिसीजन जानते हैं, दे आर ऑफ सेम माइंड, और वो अपना डिसीजन जो है उस पे मतलब बहुत सोच समझ के आए हैं, एंड दे हैव समथिंग इन देयर माइंड, दे हैव देयर ओन पर्पस इन माइंड। फिर फर्स्ट ये देख लिया कि इंडिविजुअल्स दे हैव देयर पर्पस इन माइंड। फिर जो पॉलिटिकल इंस्टीट्यूशंस हैं, लाइक वोटिंग हो गया, या इलेक्शन कमीशन हो गया, या इलेक्शन कह सकते हैं एट ब्रॉडर लेवल, इलेक्शन हो गया। Now this institution is like a rule of game, कि अब इस गेम में पार्टिसिपेट करने के लिए सारे एक्टर्स हैं, ब्यूरोक्रेट्स भी हैं, पॉलिटिशियंस भी हैं, वोटर्स भी हैं, एंड द ऑफिस होल्डर्स भी हैं, द वाना बी ऑफिस होल्डर्स, सो या एस्पिरेंट कह सकते हैं। तो ये चारों एक्टर्स जो हैं, दे आर की प्लेयर्स इन दिस गेम। सो ये इलेक्शन जो है, हाउ इट इज स्ट्रक्चरिंग, हाउ इट इज इन्फ्लुएंसिंग द स्ट्रेटेजिक डिसीजंस ऑफ ऑल दीज एक्टर्स। सो एग्जांपल यहाँ पे दिया हुआ है कि अ पॉलिटिशियन चूज टू फॉर्म अ कोलिशन गवर्नमेंट which is based on rules of electoral system and the goal of maximizing power. So again यहाँ पे देखिए, a politician को he wants to stay in power, he wants to form a government. अब उसके पास मेजॉरिटी नहीं है, तो दिस इंस्टीट्यूशन, इलेक्शन और इलेक्टोरल सिस्टम, इट प्रोवाइडेड हिम विद अ स्ट्रक्चर, अ रूल, कि अगर वो गेम में रहना चाहता है विदाउट हैविंग मेजॉरिटी, देन ही कैन फॉर्म अ कोलिशन गवर्नमेंट। सो यहाँ पे अगेन ये सारे जो फीचर्स हैं वापस देखते हैं। यहाँ पे जो पॉलिटिशियन है, ही इज अ रैशनल एक्टर एंड ही हैज अ पर्पस कि उसको गवर्नमेंट में रहना है। नाउ जो इंस्टीट्यूशन है, इलेक्टोरल सिस्टम या इलेक्शन है, इट हैज मैनी रूल्स, और उस रैशनल एक्टर, उस पॉलिटिशियन को अपने पावर में रहने के लिए एक गेम चाहिए था, एक लीवे चाहिए था, और वो लीवे यहाँ पे मिल गया कि इलेक्टोरल सिस्टम ने कहा कि if he wants to stay in power without having majority, he can form a coalition government. So this is how the rational choice institutional works. Fair criticism, it assumes too much rationality and ignore culture, emotion, historical context, and even passions and impulses. So many factors are ignored here. Where the second type is historical institutionalism. So this type, it focuses on how institutions are shaped by their historical development. So यहाँ पे it introduced the idea of path dependence, that once a path is taken, it becomes difficult to reverse it, even if the better options exist later. So ये रिजर्वेशन का हम कह सकते हैं, जैसे इंडिया में भी the reservation thing, it it is a classical example of historical institutionalism. कि during certain time, during 1990s, because of the Mandal politics, the India introduced reservations. Now, those reservations are difficult to reverse, even if we have many better options. Even if we have, social capitalism or capital socialism or neoliberalism idea along with the fusion of Scandinavian model. हमारे पास बहुत सारे options है, but this the historical path we have taken, we cannot reverse it. फिर second example है that the British, they ruled over us for 200 years, and even if they were thrown out, still the many institutions that started by them, the legal and bureaucratic system, we cannot done away with it. So ये सिस्टम अभी भी हमारे यहाँ पे है, जितने भी पोस्ट कॉलोनियल कंट्रीज में है, जो ब्यूरोक्रेटिक सिस्टम अभी भी चल रहा है. फिर criticism, it is overly deterministic and underestimate the possibility of change. Where the third type is sociological institutionalism. So this kind of institutionalism, it emphasizes culture, values, symbols, and norms in shaping institutions. So here the political behavior is shaped not only by cost benefit logic but also by social appropriateness. So जैसे बहुत सारी कंट्रीज जो हैं, they shifted to democracy. They have adopted democratic features like holding elections, but those shifts, they are under global pressure for legitimacy, but they do not serve any functional needs. बहुत सारी countries जो हैं, especially the Middle Eastern country, the Central Asian countries, जहाँ पे because of just global pressure, because of pressure from the countries of global north, because in order to invest sufficient resources, invest foreign investment in their country, उन्होंने अपने अपने countries में कुछ democratic features लागू किए, but most of these features are non-functional. Now, the significance of new institutionalism. First, it offers a comprehensive and interdisciplinary view because यहाँ पे formal political institutions and the informality, both of them, they have provided the much needed comprehensiveness. Where this approach, it explains why identical institutions behave differently across different societies. Then it has provided space for both formal and informal practices, and it tries to bridges the gap between structure and agency, history and strategy, culture and calculation. In short, it tries to fuse formality along with informality. कि the elections are free and fair, and are held by a reputed institution, Election Commission of India. But the voting behavior, some people, they still vote on the basis of caste. So यहाँ पे दोनों चीजें हैं, formality, the formal institution, but the informality वो भी है. लोग जो है, they are voting because they believe the election commission will hold a free and fair election. They have faith in the working of election commission, but then they are also voting on the basis of caste parameter. So जो ultimate outcome है, उनमें ये दोनों चीजें consider हो रही है, formal and informal. Now let's move on to the part second of this topic, the comparative methods in political analysis. So comparative methods, they are the technique to arrive at the conclusion, to arrive at the outcome across different society. And the goal of comparative method to understand patterns, causes and consequence of political phenomena. So it's quite simple. In other terms, the comparative analysis or the comparative approach, it studies input and output. The comparative political approach, it studies the political behavior of people at different level and in different countries. Now वो जो स्टडी है, टू अंडरटेक द स्टडी कि कैसे लोगों का पॉलिटिकल बिहेवियर कैसे स्टडी किया जाए, so those techniques are provided by comparative methods. So the main comparative method, first one is case study. So इस मेथड में it focuses on a single case or a group of few cases. So उसमें उस पर्टिकुलर केस की एक डीप एंड डिटेल स्टडी की जाती है. So that case can be एक कंट्री, पूरी कंट्री के पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम, पॉलिटिकल बिहेवियर की स्टडी हो रही है, या फिर इंडिया में जो एक इंस्टीट्यूशन है लाइक इलेक्टोरल सिस्टम है कि हाउ इलेक्शन कमीशन ऑफ इंडिया होल्ड इलेक्शन at pan India level with such dexterity, such efficiency, वो केस उस एक पर्टिकुलर सिंगल केस स्टडी किया जा रहा है, या फिर एक पर्टिकुलर लीडर लाइक डोनाल्ड ट्रंप हो गया, या फिर कोई और लीडर हो गया, उसकी स्टडी है, या फिर कोई पर्टिकुलर इवेंट कि जैसे एक अभी आपको इलेक्शन का बता दिया, या फिर कोई भी लाइक 20 जो रिपब्लिक डे परेड है उसके बारे में हो सकता है. So all such behavior are studied, but यहाँ पे case study में particular cases or group of similar such cases are studied. Now the key features of this method कि it try to generate hypothesis and build deeper contextual understanding, क्योंकि एक ही event को बहुत in depth analysis कर रहे हैं. फिर it is often used in qualitative research. फिर इस स्ट्रेंथ ये है कि इट ऑफर्स रिच एंड डीप कंटेक्चुअल नॉलेज एंड इट हाईलाइट्स यूनिक पॉलिटिकल डायनामिक्स, क्योंकि जो इन डेप्थ स्टडी हो रही है. बट देन लिमिटेशंस ये है कि एक ही पर्टिकुलर स्टडी की जा रही है, एक ही इवेंट की या एक ही सिमिलर ग्रुप ऑफ इवेंट्स की स्टडी की जा रही है, तो दोज आउटकम्स दे कैन नॉट बी जनरलाइज अक्रॉस मैनी कंट्रीज. देन बिकॉज एक ही ग्रुप कोहोर्ट है, वही एक ही टाइप के इवेंट की, एक ही लीडर की, इंस्टीट्यूशन की स्टडी कर रहा है, तो दे मे हैव पर्सनल बायस, सब्जेक्टिविटी एरर्स कैन बी देयर. फिर सेकंड मेथड, मोस्ट सिमिलर सिस्टम डिजाइन और MSSD. तो इस मेथड में इट कंपेयर्स टू और मोर सिमिलर कंट्रीज. Those countries they have similar in most respect, like culture similar, culture, economy, geography, all are similar, but have different political outcome. So again, in simple terms, it means that countries are similar but have different outcomes. So all such countries, all such institutions are studied. Now the purpose is to find the variable that explain the difference despite having similarity across many respects. कि दो कंट्री है, they have same culture, same economic, same geography, but political outcome different है. So वो variable, वो factor क्या है जिसकी वजह से difference है, वो study किया जाता है MSSD में. जैसे India and Pakistan both share colonial history, both were part of a single Indian subcontinent, both have the same culture, but both of them they show different level of democratic stability. India में democracy है, but Pakistan में civil military rule है. फिर the strength of this method that it reduces the number of differing variables, क्योंकि दो countries जो है उनमें स्टडी कर रहे हैं तो पहले ही जो सिमिलर हैं वो तो अलग हो गए. जैसे इंडिया पाकिस्तान की बात करें, हिस्ट्री एंड कल्चर सेम, कॉलोनियल हिस्ट्री वो सेम, ब्यूरोक्रेटिक सिस्टम वो सेम है, फिर जो लेगेसी है वो सेम है, जियोग्राफी सेम है. सो पहले ही जो डिफरेंसेस कम है, सो जो सॉरी सिमिलैरिटीज साइड में कर लेते हैं, तो डिफरेंसेस जो हैं जितने भी कम है वो इजीली हाईलाइट हो जाते हैं. But the limitation of this method is that it may oversimplify the complex political reality. And the third type, most different system design, MDSD. So ये second MSSD से उल्टा है. So यहाँ पे different countries are studied because they have similar political outcome. So दो country है, they are highly dissimilar. They have different culture, different geography, but they have similar political outcome. So ये भी एक केस है that must be studied. So यहाँ पे purpose to find the common factor that explain the similarity of outcomes. So जैसे सक्सेसफुल डेमोक्रेसी लाइक इंडिया, स्वीडन एंड जापान, अब तीनों का कल्चर सेम है. इंडिया एक साउथ एशियन कंट्री, स्वीडन एक स्कैंडिनेवियन कंट्री, जापान एक ईस्ट एशियन कंट्री. All of them they have differences in culture, economy, history, geography, but they have democratic success and its strong institution. So ये भी एक एग्जाम्पल है. फिर स्ट्रेंथ ये है कि इट इज यूजफुल फॉर फाइंडिंग यूनिवर्सल एक्सप्लेनेशन कि हाउ डिफरेंट countries can have similar political outcome. There may be some universal which are equally applicable across all cultures. Then such universality it also provide wider generalization कि अगर ऐसा है, अगर जो जापानीज इकोनॉमी है, जो स्वीडिश इकोनॉमी है और जो इंडियन इकोनॉमी है, ऑल ऑफ देम दे कैन रिस्पॉन्स in a better way during COVID-19 pandemic, then generalizations can be drawn and such pattern can be made applicable, made point of case study for future students. लेकिन limitations भी हैं that many contextual differences can be missed कि we are looking at quite broader level कि दिस इज नॉट ओनली अबाउट इंडिया वर्सेस पाकिस्तान की बहुत सारी चीजें सिमिलर हैं, सो डिफरेंसेस आर इजीली विजिबल. ऐसा केस नहीं है. यहाँ पे स्वीडन, जापान, इंडिया, इन तीनों के बीच में डिफरेंसेस इतने सारे हैं कि सिमिलैरिटीज जो हैं उन पे आना भी इट इज क्वाइट ह्यूमंगस टास्क. एंड देन पर्टिकुलर कंट्री के अपने अपने कंटेक्स्ट होते हैं. जापानीज इकोनॉमी जो है वो रेजिलिएंट क्यों है, स्वीडिश इकोनॉमी है वो वेलफेयरिस्ट क्यों है, जो इंडियन इकोनॉमी है हाउ इट विथस्टूड ऑल सच ऑनस्लॉट्स, ये सब भी जो है दे हैव डिफरेंट आउटकम्स. एंड समटाइम इट इज हार्ड टू डिटरमाइन कि जो आउटकम्स हैं लाइक द रेजिलियंस ड्यूरिंग कोविड-19 पैंडेमिक और द ओरिएंटेशन टुवर्ड्स वेलफेयरिज्म, दोनों आउटकम दे मे बी either they are common or maybe a case of coincidence. फिर जो fourth method है the quantitative analysis. So this uses numerical data and statistics to compare political system. So यहाँ पे quantitative जैसे नाम है, it is about the mathematical study. In simple term, a mathematical study, a statistical study using survey, opinion polls, economic indicators like जितने भी statistical data है, GDP, literacy rate, voter turnout, electoral data, all statistical mathematical data, they are studies to look for pattern, trends and correlations, patterns, similarities and differences. And usually large number of cases are studied together, maybe 100 countries using statistical tools, standards and deviations. Where the strength of this method, it is highly objective, replicable, and it can include the whole world, all 8 billion people. It can study all 8 billion people at one go, and it can be used, it can be applied, implemented for generating and testing broader hypotheses across countries. The limitation is that it is mathematical. It usually ignores cultural and many other contextual factors. यहाँ पे जो contextual है, it means many other factors like historical, cultural, personal, psychological, sociological. Fifth tool, the qualitative comparative analysis. So this qualitative comparative analysis, it combines qualitative case study with systematic comparison. So in simple terms, it employs case study method with the statistical method. So दोनों, the case study method and quantitative method, दोनों को एक साथ join करके we have arrived at QCA, qualitative comparison analysis. And यहाँ पे moderate number of cases होता है, developed by Charles Regin, and the methodology, it uses Boolean algebra, which is yes, no or present, absent, objective answers to identify patterns. And then such patterns are balanced at depth and breadth. In other words, such patterns, they are correlated with other contextual factors like democracy, economic crisis, and civil society strength. So in other words, कुछ moderate number of cases हैं, like 25 to 30 countries, they are studied. First, जो statistical data है, उसको study करके the patterns are found. Then those patterns, they are studied with the contextual factors, जैसे case study में करते हैं. Then उन दोनों के basis पे the final outcomes is arrived at. फिर strength ये है, it bridges the gap between small n and large cases. So ये जो strength है, first, it is simple. When few cases, which is a limitation of case study method, and the large n, which is a limitation of statistical method, quantitative method. So यहाँ पे क्योंकि ये method जो है, it integrate both the methods, the case study method and the statistical method. So first strength is कि moderate number of cases हैं, ना तो केस स्टडी जैसे एक या a few है, और ना ही statistical जैसे 100 और 150 है. The case studies are moderate. So उसके जो moderate cases के लिए this particular study, this particular approach is quite relevant. Then it is more flexible than pure statistics कि सिर्फ GDP numbers ही नहीं study कर रहे हैं, contextual parameters, contextual factor, historical background, informal जितने भी चीजें हैं वो भी study कर रहे हैं. फिर limitations, that it requires careful case selection and the technical complexity. So careful case selection क्योंकि we are looking at moderate numbers, then our study, it should be free of subjective biases. Like if you club together all the South Asian countries and looking at the poverty data. Now जितने भी South Asian या Southeast Asian countries हैं, उन सबको integrate करके, then first statistical data जो है, mathematical data है, ये तो easily available है, वो तो government database से मिल जाएगा. But then जब आप contextual की तरफ जाएंगे, now here comes the problem कि वहां पे आप क्या चीज, कौन से variables हैं या फिर कौन सी realities आप integrate करेंगे. Sometimes you might be fooled around कि पर्टिकुलर कंट्रीज जो हैं, अफगानिस्तान की बात करें, अफगानिस्तान की जो हिस्टोरिकल लेगेसी है, इसके कल्चरल पैरामीटर्स हैं, जो वहाँ पे जो साइकोलॉजिकल एंड सोशियोलॉजिकल डायमेंशंस हैं, वो फर्स्ट you may not get the actual reality. So in short, the case selection thing, it need to be careful. फिर टेक्निकल कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी, सेम कि जो डेटा जो है वो उन्हीं कंट्री के मिल पाते हैं जिनके गवर्नमेंट डेटाबेस पे अवेलेबल है. फिर रिलायबिलिटी ऑफ डेटा, बायसेस ना हो. फिर टेक्निकल कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी में जो अदर इनफॉर्मल पैटर्न्स इंटीग्रेट करना चाहते हैं, हिस्टोरिकल डेटा हो गया, जो साइकोलॉजिकल डेटा है, उनको टेक्निकल पैरामीटर्स में कैसे इंटीग्रेट करें. सो दैट्स इट. Now the challenges in using comparative methods. So first, too many variables, not enough cases, which is the small n problem. So small n problem में, when we are looking at two countries that have many variables, many differences, but similarities are not there. So ये भी एक problem है कि उसमें like एक simple term में you are looking at two people. One is short, other is tall. Then one is fair, other is black. Then one is from Norway. This one is from Nigeria. Then this one, it is highly educated, and this one is illiterate. तो यहाँ पे डिफरेंसेस, वेरिएबल्स बहुत सारे हैं, सिमिलैरिटीज नहीं है. सो दैट्स द स्मॉल एन प्रॉब्लम, और वो भी एक चैलेंज है कंपैरेटिव मेथड्स में. द सेकंड इज डिफिकल्टी इन आइसोलेटिंग कॉजिलिटी. सो इट means that any particular outcome, any political outcome, why did the Indian people from the Western UP, they voted for a particular caste group. So यहाँ पे इस political outcome पे आने के लिए they cannot be a single answer. Many different contexts are there. A recent riot can be an issue. Maybe the contender, the caste contender, he may be a philanthropist. ये भी एक argument हो सकता है. Maybe uh, the opposing, the other candidates, they may not be that good. They may be worst. It's between choosing between the worst and the worst. So यहाँ पे जो other contenders हैं वो worst हो सकते हैं. So कौन से parameters हैं, historical things भी हो सकती है. Maybe जो जो contender है, he might belong to the casteist ideology, but still he may have certain progressive ideas. So ये causality जो है, cause factor जो है, it is often difficult to arrive at. और उसी में फिर cultural differences and data availability ये भी है. Now the PYQ insights. So PYQ, they often ask about how any particular approach focus too much on formal rules and ignore informal practices, especially the new institutional approach. Then the second question from critical culture approach. So frequently asked questions are about Almond and Verba's classification, parochial, subject, and participant culture. Then from political economy, question focus on how politics and economics interact. ये मैं जो PDF है ये भी मैं description में डाल दूंगा. फिर question from Marxist political economy that explore class conflict, capital and capitalism and critique of liberal democratic system. A question from new institutionalism. It entails comparison with the old institutionalism. Fair from comparative methods. Question tests the differences between all the methods. Case study method, MSSD, MDSD, QCA, and then application based questions, which often ask why this method or this approach shoots a given question. Then certain question, they test matching thinkers, the MCQ questions. Now, if you have found these lectures helpful, you can support my work with a voluntary contribution, and it will be totally voluntary. This is my UPI, and any amount is appreciated. And I am asking this because I am in need of money, and to continue making videos for a long time, I need a little support of a little but voluntary support. I will not force anybody. This is it. और उसके अलावा ये लेक्चर है जो बड़ा था. I rushed through many pages, but I still try to stay up with the bearable length around 1 hour 20 minutes. So if something that I might have skipped, something that I might not have given good time, you can ask me in the comment section. This is it. Thank you very much, and subscribe the channel.